We now have a real bloody number 9. Hear him roar. Florian Balogun is a great American. I cannot say that enough. And to tonight's game itself, the true final. We did wring our hands. We need to say this ahead of the semi-finals of this Nations League, that the US and Mexico should meet in the final. But that's the old maths. Canada are the true kings of CONCACAF. And this was our chance to take not exactly their crown so much, because they did still win qualifying for the World Cup, which stands high and mighty, but we could at least grab a jewel or two. And for Canada, they took the field tonight, dreaming of their first trophy since the 2000 Gold Cup. 23 long years they've yearned for this moment. It's fascinating. Their coach, John Herdman, said something really interesting pre-game. He said the United States has a massive quality advantage over every team in CONCACAF at the moment. They're the big dogs. USA and Mexico are still hunting the other big dogs. But he was really throwing the pressure on the United States. We were the overdogs. And from a US perspective, going into this, we really just were talking about the flux. The US manager still eating up all the bandwidth. Journalists had spent the time between Friday's news conference and kickoff asking every single player they could about the reemergence of Greg Berhalter, Ricardo Pepi. I think it's great, to be honest. It's great for the squad. Personally, I think everything that happened between us stays behind us. I've got to say, what exactly do we really think these human beings are going to say, these professional athletes? I mean, football players especially are trained to deflect and say as little as possible in any moment, especially these moments. Believe me, they are not. Those who expect this, please prepare to be disappointed. They are not burying their souls in press conferences or in open media moments. They're mostly, almost entirely trying to make the opposite of the kind of noise we yearn for. They don't want to stick out, particularly young ones with their whole career ahead of them. This is not news. This is not breaking anything. I can say we can ask every single player in the top 400, I can safely say, in the United States men's side. They will all be falling into line in this moment. But anyway, this game was another BJ Callahan joint. The interim to the interim, that joyful, jolly, tattooed king who looks like he's the offensive line coach on some mid-American athletic conference team. And he made some bold calls again ahead of this one. We had red card problems. There would be no Weston. There'd be no Dest. Our mate Joe Scally in for Serginho. Brendan Aronson in for McKinney. Also Zimmerman in for Mars Robertson, who's out with a little hamstring knack. And it was a very, very attacking lineup. Really an overload. The promise of Callaghan, our new king, surrounded by Pulisic, Weah, Rayner pushing up, and Brendan in there. Lots of early flicks. A suggestion of real American confidence. Canadians, for their part, eager to fling the ball at Alphonso Davies early, have him test Joe Scally. I'm going to say Chris Richards early on. When you rewatch the game, two things will stand out. His admirable porn mustache and how lively he was early. Just his intelligent positioning, constantly setting him up throughout the game to be the one, making it look as though the ball was coming to him with his hard work, his hard thinking. Always a want to clear the ball. And the game, I've got to say, it was a really thin-looking crowd. That was the sad point of tonight. In Vegas, a final. Incredible stadium. Tiny field, yes. But at home, the United States playing at home in a final, and you looked at that crowd, that sparse crowd. I think it was announced at 35,000 on the dot. But you looked at it and thought, whoa, we got so much more work to do. And more of the team's relationship to its fans in a moment. But on the field, the football from the off was in full-on CONCACAF frenzy mood. Just early note show. This one's interesting. BJ Callahan has not got the bounce pass memo. Zimmerman flash one just wide. Matt Turner alert to a Larin drive. We had the excellent Weah menacing 1 second, and now Alphonso Davies seeking to scorch the next. Looked like all the stars were out tonight, but the opening goal for the United States came from both an unexpected method and an unexpected fashion, and an unexpected goal scorer. 12 minutes, a fine corner from Gio Reyna. Seriously, so refreshing to see him take our set pieces. And Chris Richards in, let's say, acres of space, the gent who rose up to head home for his first United States goal. And I was so happy for that man in that moment. He is such a magical gent from Birmingham, Alabama. Hear his story. His story came on our show, and I just I loved him before. I loved him all the more afterwards. The opposite of soccer territory, but a singular character, a singular force of will came out of there and told us how devastated he was to miss the World Cup due to injury. So shattered emotionally, couldn't even bring himself to watch the United States opening game. And then he's had to show incredibly deliberate patience this season, extremely limited moments for Crystal Palace. And he rose up, nodded through the keeper into the shallow nets of Vegas, and it was just Roll Tide, it was War Eagle, it was all the greats of Alabama football. Penny for Gio Reyna's thoughts in that moment, to be candid, because at that point, and there would be more, this was his third goal contribution in a final for the United States, tied for the most, this is amazing, in American history with the greats, Landon Donovan and Clint Dempsey. And he's just still, remind ourselves of this, amongst all the hubbub, all the furor, all the insanity, kid is still just 20 years of age. And I thought after that first goal, how this Gio and Greg relationship is going to be the story for the rest of the year. When Greg comes back, how Greg uses him, leans into him. I imagine Gio will be starting. There'll be a rebuilding of confidence, a reconnection, a public reconnection, a rebuilding of trust. But with performances like this, the player has so much leverage as that wound, please God, is healed. The other storyline to that opener after the World Cup, in which we watched so many set pieces won, so many set pieces wasted, was to watch the United States men score a set piece was a genuine joy. BJ Callahan is a football genius. GFOP at El Football Junkie tweeted, BJ Callahan looks like a decent clean-up hitter on a Sunday Beer League softball team. Gotta be honest. Bite your arm off for BJ Callahan to Everton. I am starting to believe he is the chosen one. John Herdman's game plan for Canada is always to score first. He talks about it. He admits it. We score first, then we control the game through defending. They clearly have to try and conjure a different plan, different blueprint for this one. And the answer was, what did they have? The answer was not a lot. They scuffed, they scrapped, but it was very bitty. The overall headline for me in this game was the quality gap between these two collectives was so evident. And in a surging moment, suddenly, blink of an eye, it was 2-0. Fine, intelligent header from Tim Weah. Let's look at that goal again. Yeah, I think the other players get all glory, but that moment of release by Tim Weah, just so deft to set Gio free. Gio drove forward. And the thing I loved about this goal was watching Balogun, just his second game for the United States, already feeling assertive enough to point where he wanted the ball. Where did he want that pass? He showed as he was running, arm out. And Gio, credit him, had the chemistry already to match flow, stride for stride with the crafty slip pass. Second assist of the night for him. And Balogun needed no invitation to muscle off his defender, create separation, and first touch, lash home with authority. An emphatic moment, honestly, more than the goal for the English American, born in Brooklyn, Nigerian parents, just chose the United States, wanted to leave this camp having stamped his signature, stamped his authority on the position. And this was more than a goal. It was a signal. We have a real bloody number 9. After a World Cup campaign in which, yes, we did, with my own eyes, we started Jesus Ferreira in a critical game of football. We now have a real bloody number 9. Hear him roar. Florian Balogun is a great American. I cannot say that enough. I love saying it. It fills me with joy as another English American. I honestly consider myself American. But to see that gent revel in that moment, Lord, I love saying that. Florian Balogun, a great American, 2-0. God bless Gio. He'd go off at half-time with a knock, but a hero's performance. GFOP Ian Leeson said, the only thing he's seen more active in football than Gio is Jack Grealish's liver. Canada, now desperate. To be clear, they had chances. God bless Matt Turner. Down low twice to parry, repressed Canadian flurry. Second half, a lot of good intention, sloppy execution. A Larin, fair, borderline howler miss from close range. Scally, I thought he was intelligent. I thought he was patient in keeping Alphonso Davies at arm's length. I admired that performance tonight. Another player who really believes and has said as much. I'm sure if you shove a microphone in Joe Scally's face and say, what do you think of Greg Berhalter's return? They'll say, Greg's great. We all love him. But he said, I should have had more minutes. I mean, they played Shaq Moore, right? We played Shaq Moore instead of Scally in the World Cup. Tonight, I think he proved probably should have had a few more World Cup minutes than zero. Chris Richards, also immense. Overall, the Americans have largely learned, big picture, that Canada are a third of the team when they don't have snowbanks to dive into post-goal scoring. Watching Tajon Buchanan try and push Brendan Aronson in the back as he subbed off slowly, and then having Christian Pulisic bark in his face, chef's kiss. US fans had the delight of finishing the game by chanting, "Stick to hockey," to the Canada fans, and it was magnificent. Poor Canada. There would be no first trophy in 23 years for them. As Paul Auster wrote in The Invention of Solitude, I love that book. Just because you wander in the desert, it doesn't mean there's a promised land. I'm saying that to you, Ariel Helwani. And that was that, even without Tyler Adams. Weston McKennie, Serginho Dest, the United States, irresistible. A much-needed trophy in context with back-to-back dominant performances against our two biggest rivals, shutouts both. Really a bolt of positivity in a week of chaos. BJ Callahan is the king of CONCACAF, and I love that. I do. I love that man. He is the big gulp of international football managers, and I adore him for it. Copa cannot come quick enough. That was my takeaway from this past week. Next summer's tournament, for the US to truly come on, which is what we want ultimately. We are not living in the minute. We are not living minute to minute. We want progress. We want statement performances in statement games. And for us to truly come on as a footballing micro power, we got to play. We got to test ourselves outside of CONCACAF. Greg's record against non-CONCACAF opponents in that first tenure was his Achilles heel. Let us do the Copa and let us enjoy every single second. These boys, when they are really flowing, you can just see the enjoyment they get from their own performances as individuals, their own performances as a collective, and it's a delight. And talking to Greg, we'll say one of the many triumphs people hand Greg Berhalter when they boost him is that he won the Nations League and the Gold Cup. Well, BJ Callahan, interim to the interim manager, aka the pain sponge, just won the Nations League. And now, many people trying to work out why Greg Berhalter's not coaching Gold Cup. It's been floated that part of the reason is that they wanted a clean start, mitigating against the possibility of possibly losing in the Nations Cup and the Gold Cup, and somehow, the new manager being behind the eight ball. But BJ Callahan wins the Nations League. If BJ Callahan then wins the Gold Cup, genuinely a remarkable moment, we would then have a two-time winning, right now perfect record manager stand down. There was a line someone put on Twitter. Honestly, it read like Greg's burner account, that both BJ Callahan and the gent who came before him, Anthony Hudson, who just decamped for league football in Qatar, the both of them would either just fronts for Greg. That was a theory floated. It was really Greg calling the shots all this time. I can assure you, speaking to agents, Greg was really trying to get interviews in English football. Talked about that on Friday. Someone tweeted that both Hudson and Callahan, who were members of Berhalter's staff, that they're actually, ultimately it's his victory because they're part of, quote, Greg's coaching tree. And look, CONCACAF is CONCACAF. All I want to say is BJ Callahan owned it this past week. Huge respect to him in deeply difficult circumstances, delivering, I think, a joy we all really needed. Having said that, we need to recognise this is a surreal moment. Mexico are in complete and utter shambles. The Canadian Federation speak to the players, both men's and women's, makes almost every federation in our region look organised and professional, which is quite an accomplishment. And US soccer, financially, commercially, player pool talent-wise, we are so very, very clear. It's where we are. Callahan will now continue to coach into the Gold Cup. I love watching that man. More BJ ball, Daddy wants. Greg will then return for the fall. Some massive games there. For him, possession ultimately 9/10 of the law. I talked a lot about his return on Friday. You can find out on YouTube. I'm not going to, reheat this stuff. I'm sure there'll be some questions in a minute. But I will say, I think more will come out about the reappointment and the reasoning behind this choice as more managers speak on or off the record. That'll be very interesting. Will Thierry Henry, will Patrick Vieira, and especially Jesse Marsh, will they talk about the nature of their interactions with the battery of tests the US sporting director Matt Crocker talked about in Friday's news conference? I do wonder how many of them actually got far in the tests. Did Vieira take the psych test? I think their words are going to be fascinating as we move forward. And I have spoken a lot about this Wild Week. I think we're all exhausted. But one note I do need to hit tonight is about the fan reaction, which has been, I think they said on Paramount Plus tonight, they said it's been largely mixed, which is a lovely euphemism they're going to stick to. But there has been a counter reaction to that, quite deeply and quite loud in the soccer bubble, negative reaction. There's been a counter reaction about how furious an element of the fans are. And I want to say about that, to me, football at its heart is about passion and commitment and feeling things. And I'd say the passion, the energy and the opinions of American football fans shouldn't be mocked. They shouldn't be derided. There is a school of thought right now on social media that puts those opinions down and says, they're armchair warriors who never played the game. What do they know? And honestly, I read them, and to me, it misunderstands what football is all about. If you look at Old Trafford, say on match day, if you look at Nottingham Forest, look at Arsenal, look at Everton, look at Newcastle, the post-match conversations on social media, the post-match conversations on TalkSport, the call-in shows, the intense opinion that follows every kick of the ball in the Premier League. And put it this way, the notion which is taken most seriously in the Premier League is that when a manager has lost the fan base, it's a point of no return. See Graham Potter, see Frank Lampard, see Antonio Conte last season. They lost the fan base and were fired almost immediately. In England, no one mocks the fans. No one says, God, they know nothing because they didn't play the game. Why are we going to fire our manager just because they've lost the fans? And we shouldn't impose that threshold here. Say, they didn't play the game. What do they know? Football, especially because of this, has lived in the shadows for decades in this nation. It is growing fast, and it's been one of the most magical things to witness. The fan bases have a larger layer upon layer of new fans coming all the time in this nation, every single season. And I hope it's a big tent, big passion, big opinion. All of that should be applauded. All of that should be appreciated. All of that should be truly valued. Honestly, never taken for granted. Definitely not put down and derided. It's only going to get bigger with Lionel Messi coming, the Women's World Cup coming, and then the World Cup proper coming after the Copa. Our soccer bubble is expanding all the time, and it's magnificent to witness. We should revel in that future, in that reality, because my God, we have all dreamed about it for so bloody long. Listen to the full version of this podcast and all our podcasts wherever you get your pods. But first, subscribe here for more Men in Blazers videos and courage.